Hello, my name is Chris Aguilar, and I work for the City of Sacramento's Finance Department, specifically in the Procurement Division. This demonstration video is to give an overview of some new functionality that we're in the process of adding to PeopleSoft. Specifically, this functionality is called the Procurement Contract. Now, you might want to ask yourself, what is a procurement contract and why would I use it? This is an electronic version of a contract that allows the user to track very important information like expiration and renewal dates, the contract spend amount, how much is out there on the actual POs, are we getting close to overshooting that, where are we? In the past, this sort of information is often tracked manually via spreadsheet and so on, and this internal module will allow the user to enter this information electronically, and then when this information becomes an actual signed agreement, it can be used to help track it. So that being said, I do want to stress that this demo video is not meant to be a replacement for training. This is simply an overview, and there will be parts of this process that we will not cover here. This is just going to cover the electronic portion, the tracking and so on, the authoring of the document, e-sign, and so on, and a few other objects will be handled in full training. So please, let's go ahead and start the video and the demo right now. To start the process of creating a procurement agreement, there are two basic ways to get into it. One is to have already created a sourcing event, which is a bid, and award that bid. Upon awarding of that bid, the system will immediately migrate the bid information over to the procurement contract, and then the user can go from there. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to create a procurement agreement from scratch, which is also a use case that we have because not every contract comes from a bid. And to start this, we need to go to the actual module. The module can be found under Procurement Contracts, Add Update Contracts. From the contract entry screen, we will add our procurement agreement. To do so, we will click on the Add a New Value tab, and this will bring up some standard options, which are not to be changed. These will stay the same for every contract that you create, and you will go ahead and start by clicking Add. What we see here is the actual contract entry screen. This is a screen where we will put in all of our basic information, including things like the value, some basic information about the buyer, the supplier, the renewal and expiration dates, and so on. Before we do that, we're going to go through and explain what these options mean step by step to make it clear what we're actually entering here. The first thing we want to notice here is the version. All contracts start as version 1. As we change the version, which is the equivalent of doing a change order or a supplement to this tracking contract, this version will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. The contract ID says next. When we save this, it will immediately create a unique contract ID, and we don't have to worry about doing that. The system will do that for us, and that will be persistent. Open means that this particular contract is in the equivalent of a draft status. Nothing we do will matter until this contract is approved. The administrator buyer, in this case, I have set up as myself. To search for another user, you would click here, and it would bring up a list of users, and you could pick anyone that you would like. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and leave that as myself. It's now time to fill in the header information, which encapsulates a lot of basic information, very important information, that we need to have, which is mandatory to track this particular procurement agreement. Where it says contract style, this will always be a general contract. Please do not change this. For supplier, we need to find and search for the supplier that we are going to award this contract to. This is done by clicking on the little hourglass here. You can get a list. This will bring up just a generic list, or you can search by a particular vendor. In this case, I'm going to do a little search, and I want to award this to Iron Mountain. You can notice that once I've done that, it will populate the name, the supplier ID, and it will populate a generic begin date or start of work date for this contract as of today. Now, this is not always correct, so I want to say that my contract, when I can actually start using it, when I can create requisitions and POs and they will track, that needs to be this date right here. In this instance, I'm going to set that a little bit in the future, the end of this month, which happens to be April. Now, the next thing you see here is the expiration date. This is the final expiration date. If my contract is going to be 3 years, this date is going to be 3 years from this date, the begin date that we just added. Now, if it's something where I'm going to have renewals, I will go ahead and put the next renewal date down below, but the expiration date will not change. For the sake of this particular demonstration, I'm going to set our expiration date a few years in the future. Now, our first renewal date is going to be 1 year from the start date. The start date is 4/30/2019. So my renewal date is going to be 1 year from now, which is 4/30/2020. Now the system knows that my contract starts this date. It has a renewal date 1 year later and fully expires a few years down the line. Currency, which is United States dollars, needs to be left alone as the city does pay in US dollars. The primary contact information may or may not be in the vendor table. If you'd like to use it, you can search. And if you see something that is useful to you, you can select it. The supplier contract reference is exactly that. It is your supplier contact. And in this case, you can put the person's name and perhaps any kind of contact information that you think is relevant. The description is very important. This is the textual basis of how you can search for and find this procurement contract later. I'm going to go ahead and award this for shredding services. The master contract ID is based on the notion that there will be instances where we will have several different contracts that will be linked under one contract ID number, which is the master contract ID. This particular number is created by procurement, and the user can go in, and once this number has been created, they can search for and link to the proper value. In this case, I have a test here. I'm going to link to this. This is only relevant, once again, if you have multiple contracts that need to be kind of folded under the umbrella of a larger master agreement. The tax exempt ID we don't generally use. It is very important that we have a department. The department is the department for which this procurement agreement will be tracked. In this case, I'm going to put 0600 1511 because I happen to know that that is procurement. One could also go here and search and find their department ID if they don't know it. For instance, if I put 0600, it's going to show me everything that matches that. I'm going to go ahead and leave that for now. The next, and probably one of the most important numbers on this whole page, is the maximum amount of this contract. For this particular instance, I'm going to go ahead and set this at $10,000. Now that we've entered some of the basic information, we're going to add a little bit more information. And we're going to do that to start from the Add Comments screen. We're going to go ahead and click this. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add documents that need to live with this procurement contract, things we want to be able to bring up later, but that are not necessarily going to be printed on the final contract. For instance, insurance is a great example of this. I'm going to go ahead and note that this is insurance, and I'm going to attach my actual insurance document. There it is. Once I have attached and uploaded this document will live with this procurement agreement, and I will always be able to access this. You can see I've created one valid comment with an attachment here with the ACORD document. You can also view this if you'd like to make sure that you've got the right document. Now, procurement always requires on their purchase orders a certain standard header text, which has a lot of valuable information for both the supplier and the city. What's nice about these electronic tracking agreements is that I can add this standard header comment and have this propagate and migrate to every single purchase order that is linked to this particular procurement agreement. The way this works is we're going to create a specific comment for this, and we're going to say use standard comments. From here, we have various types of standard comments. The PO comments are the ones that we want to use, which are PO related comments. And there are standard comments that go with that. So we will go over here and we will select the standard option, which is right here, standard PO. And you will notice that we get some automated text there, which relates to the bid, the city agreement, the contact, supplier contact, and so on. We're going to click OK, and this will accept this text. Now, the contract manager is going to go in here, and they're going to put whatever the agreement number is. We'll find that out in a second. But they're going to put their contact information. And they're going to put the supplier contact information. Basically, they're going to fill this out as completely as possible so that the end user will not have to put this information in again and again. So this is a very useful little bit of automation here. We're going to strongly suggest and actually probably require that this be put in. Once we have this, we want to click Copy to Purchase Order. And that guarantees that what I just did right there will automatically migrate when someone creates a requisition and it becomes a PO. This standard text will come across. So once everything is good, we've gone ahead and we've put our insurance, we've attached it, and this is not going to the purchase order note. And we have our standard text, which is going to the purchase order. Once everything is good, then we're going to click OK. We're now ready to move to the next section, which is the order contract options. Here, you see many different tick boxes, but there are only two that we need to worry about. And those two are auto default and allow open item reference. Let's explain to what these are and what we need to set them. Auto default means that by default, if we leave this way, the system will try to guess when the requester is entering a requisition the proper procurement contract. This is not what we want. We want the requisitioner to select the correct procurement contract to make sure we always get the right result. So this must always, every single time, be deselected. Now, the other option that we need to look at here is allow open item reference. And this always needs to be selected. The reason being is if I don't select this, the system will look for specific items. And if those items don't exist, then the requester will not be able to put in just generically what they want. We want this contract to be basically a bucket of money. And we want to track this bucket via the requisition lines. And those lines need to be available to be used and created however we wish. And to do so, we allow open item reference. Open item meaning we can make the requisition lines for anything that we want. And at this point, having set auto default to off and allow open reference on, we can move down to the next section. Now let's take a look at the last few items on this page. The voucher contract options will not be used by us, so we will completely ignore this section. The contract items, you need to click this little expand section to see. By default, there are no contract lines here, and that is exactly what we want. If this had come in from a sourcing event or bid, there might be lines here. If there were lines here, we want to use the minus key, the little delete row icon here, to get rid of them. And you say, why do you want to get rid of these? Because, as I mentioned before, we want this contract to be just a bucket of money and not linked to any particular line. So whatever your requisition is, whatever your PO is, it will hit the total amounts here and trigger the proper thresholds and so on. So always make sure to expand this item, the contract items, and ensure that you see no lines here. One of the very last options that we need to set are contract categories. It is required that you have at least one. And what this is used for is so that the system can associate this contract with a particular product category, which also allows a requester to be able to search for these particular procurement contracts by category. Now, if you know what it is, it's normally a number. You can just type it in here, but I don't really know what shredding services is. So I'm going to click the little search icon there, and I'm going to go up to description, and I'm going to type the word shred and see what I get. There you go. That's it. Document shredding services. That is exactly what I need. Now, if there were other associated categories, you could use the plus and you could add more, but you do have to have at least one. Once you have set this, now it's time to save the procurement agreement. And if you jump up here to the top, you will notice that we now have a contract ID. This is what we will use going forward, and if this contract does generate an authored agreement, which is a final official signed agreement that goes into our CARA system, that's the number that will be used. Once we've entered all the basic information about this procurement agreement, now it's time to tell the system to send us messages based on this data. And the way we do this is we use the thresholds and notifications option. This will allow us to use the data we've entered to fire off email notifications to us based on certain criteria. The first thing we're going to do is look at this, send date amount notification. That is exactly what it says. This is going to send me or whoever I designate, could be more than one person, email notifications when certain things happen in regards to the date or the contract amount. Now, if you'll remember, we have previously set up in the system renewal dates and expiration dates. So you see notify user when contract is within specified days of expiration date. If I want to know 3 months before this contract fully expires, no more renewals, I can put a number of days here. In this case, 90. That means 3 months before this date occurs, I will get a notification. Now, this particular agreement is also set up to renew every year, so I also want to get a little bit of notification before we do that. The option down here, approval due date, we don't generally use, so we're going to skip that. We do use maximum amount notification, and this is based on the actual amount of the contract. In this case, it's $10,000, and by $10,000, that means that we can write $10,000 worth of purchase orders. And we want to know, say, this is $10,000. Say when we hit $9,000 and we know we're getting near the end of that, and we can't write any more POs beyond 10, we want to know. So I can put that amount, I want to know percent less than the maximum, say 10%, and it will calculate amount less than maximum 1,000, less percent. The notification amount is $9,000. So that means that when I encumber via creating POs $9,000, the minute I encumber more than that, I will get a notification. Now, spend notification, and you do have to click this box up here to show that, that says notify user when release amount exceeds the thresholds. This is on a per purchase order level. You're not required to use this, but if you had a contract that was very limited, say $10,000, and you knew that 10 people needed to use that, no one should really be spending, say, more than $1,000. So the threshold could be whatever the maximum amount of the PO can be before you get notified. In this case, I'll say $1,000. So when someone tries to create a purchase order for $1,500, I will get a notification. Now that we've set up all of these thresholds, we need to tell the system who are we actually going to send all of this to. And you need to pick the notification type. In this case, let's start with renewal. I want to know when I'm going to get renewed. You are going to put in your ECAPS user ID here, and of course you can search these. Whoops, it didn't like that. Let me try this again. There we go. And as you can see, it's populated my name and my email address, which should be correct. So when the renewal date hits the 90-day threshold, this person, myself, will get this. I'm going to add a second one for expiration, and this is going to work the same exact way. These people do not have to be the same. I could use myself, but if I wanted an additional person to know about the expiration, I could just add another one. I could search for another user. And the users that come up, I can pick anybody. And it will go ahead and put their email. That one's kind of a fake one, but that's fine. We'll just let it be. We're going to add one more for the spend threshold since we did set that up. We're going to do the maximum amount, and I'm going to send that to myself. So that's the amount down here when we get to the 9,000. And I will also do the spend threshold, which is the amount for the purchase orders that we don't want to exceed, in this case, $1,000. Once we've done this, we have all of our notifications set. We've set the values, 90 days for everything here, within 10% of the end of the contract amount, $1,000 per PO. We don't really want to exceed that. We want to be told, and we have $10,000. We're now set. We can click OK, and that is ready to go. Now that all the basic information has been entered to create this procurement contract, we must ask ourselves, what is the next step? If we're using this procurement contract solely as a venue for tracking PO encumbrances, firing off notifications, sending the emails, and so on, and it's very important, there is no authored document against this. And when I say authored document, authored agreement. That would be an agreement that had to go out for formal signatures, had to come back, perhaps go to council, get signed, and go into CARA. If that's not happening, and we're using this procurement contract strictly as a way to track against POs, we can go ahead and flip this to approved, and we can go down and save it. At this point, now that we've saved this, this is an active procurement contract, and this can be used by a requisitioner. When creating a requisition, they're going to go in and they're going to link to this contract ID. Once they do that, any purchase order that comes from that will be subject to this maximum amount. We'll fire off the thresholds and notifications as we have previously asked. If we plan to use this procurement contract to track against an authored agreement, then we're not done yet. At this point, we're going to leave this open and we're going to create the document. This is going to be part of our formal training. I'm not going to cover it here. We will create the document. The document will generate, based on some wizard questions, we'll create a nice PDF. The document will get some attachments. The document will get signed electronically. The document will come back to us, and then the document will go into CARA and become executed. Once we have that document, that contract, and it's executed, then we're going to roll back to this screen and we're going to hit approved. And then we are in the same situation we were when we were just doing tracking, except now we have this, and once again, we do have to save this. We have a procurement agreement that is linked to an authored agreement that will track against the procurement encumbrances, will fire off the thresholds and the notifications, and so on. So essentially, at this point, we're done. We will cover more topics via training, including the creation of amendments, doing attachments, authoring the documents, sending it out for e-sign, and so on. But for now, this demonstration is just a basic overview of creating this tracking portion of the contract, and I hope it helps everyone to understand the flow of how that works. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing everyone in class.